So, how's your project? Have you got a project?
Yeah, I think so. The only thing I'm a bit confused, I haven't actually been to the place. I haven't had yet. So I'm a little bit unsure how big the land is and
Okay.
what area. Like he's given the guy that's, it's basically like an extension, a bit of land that a current sort of community, the garden thing, is hoping to acquire. And the guy who's the coordinator for the garden gave me the address, but I think he just gave me the address of the community garden.
Oh. Well, Richard, mate. Who did you speak to? Wasn't Richard May, was it?
Rich May was the one that
Oh, yeah.
suggested this guy to me. Trevor. He's the coordinator for the sanctuary Mahi.
Oh, beautiful. You do the sanctuary.
Yeah. So
Oh, Trevor's a lovely
how come we're leaving?
That's a good question. you to come watch us. So I don't know if people are there or whatever. If you want to text me if you are listening to this, that'll be fine. So right, let's bring up the screen.
Wait, this whole session is being YouTubed, you're saying?
Yeah.
Where's the camera?
Hmm?
Is there a camera?
There's one here which is showing the whiteboard, and this is what I'm streaming the content. What, you want to be on television?
No. No.
I've switched everything up. It's only my voice and your voice, and it's the slides I'm streaming.
I'm all good not being on television. By the way.
So, April is the bottom line. That's when we'll actually be gone. There's another complication that's come in as well, because on the 10th of October, I go into hospital for a hip replacement, which basically takes me out of action. Everyone that tells me says what you see on YouTube is look so and so, you'll be up and running after about 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, my father-in-law couldn't believe it when he woke up from the surgery how much better he felt.
Yeah, well, I've got muscles I have. I'm actually relatively fit, and before the hip went, I was relatively flexible. And so on and so on. So he said you're a perfect candidate for a hip replacement. You're actually young enough to enjoy it, and your body's in good nick, so that you'll have a very quick recovery. So I found out that during the week. So the 10th of October is when that happens. The ones that are fixed are the 7th of October, which is because I've got a guy called Ben Chia, who's actually a tree crops expert. I've got him coming in, and that's the only day in October that he can do it. If you want hot water, the blue flask is hot water. So then the 7th is fixed. The other one that's fixed is the where is it? Producing food on the 11th of November. I have another permaculture teacher coming from a woman called Merve, I think I pronounced her surname, she's from church, and she's specialised in huapikore, maramataka, and the Maori way of growing. So she actually teaches that down there. So she comes up and she gives us a whole session on how to grow by the moon, and why it works and how it works and how it fits in. Fits into Maori tradition and all that sort of thing.
So are they similar to the biodynamic calendar or slightly different?
The Maori calendar is very different from the Maori. The principles are saying you grow something that needs light when the moon is ascending, and you grow something that is root when the moon is descending. They don't have any of the hoo-ha with all the
moon in opposition to Saturn and
they don't have any of that hoo-ha. I say hoo-ha, I mean it's a bit derogatory, but no, they don't have any of that philosophy built in.
Right.
But they're much more also, the Maramataka is built up from local knowledge.
Yes.
So over years and years, so each region of New Zealand will have a slightly different calendar than any other one.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be in Hawke's Bay or you're going to be down in Southland, you need to get the local calendar from the people down there.
Yeah, that's cool.
The Maori,
closely aligned it was to the biodynamic.
it's the same. I mean, as I say, you sow your seeds because they need the root. You sow your seeds when you sow your seeds when it's rising, because the seeds need to come up for light, and you then transplant when it's waning, so that you actually get the root system set up quickly. It's a lovely, sowing seeds, planting seeds. I can tell you all about biodynamics because we up to about a year ago we used to be full on biodynamic here. We never went to the Demeter certification, but we did do all the bits and pieces.
So what's the meaning of biodynamic?
Have you heard of Steiner, Rudolf Steiner? He does Steiner education.
Yeah.
He was an Austrian philosopher. He, at the turn of end of the 1800s, the tractors, the whole way of doing farming is going to change over the next number of years with mechanization, but the whole attitude is changing. can you give us some guidance? And he produced what we call the 7 agricultural lectures, and they're all about how he was a psychic, so he connected with whoever he connects to, and he got all the messages, and Divine gave these 7 lectures, and they've been converted now into the biodynamic system. And the biodynamic system is it's basically built around a cow. A cow is a very stable animal. It's got the horns which actually stick into the ground and transfer, so it's a good transfer of energy, and it links back to all the Vedic and the Indian philosophy, the Vedic philosophy in India and so on. And it goes a lot further than that. We'll talk about it in the session, but that's the essence of the biodynamic. And so you create a lot of preparations, as they're called. But
500 in the cow poo.
Yeah, but cow poo is the basic one. You collect cow poo up, you remove all the insects, you remove all the straw, and you mix it with eggshells to your calcium, and you put it into the ground either in horns or in a pit, and you cover it, and you leave it till the following spring, and you take it out, and the manure has changed into fertilizer, which it does anyhow. It's just a chemical change, but in biodynamic terms, you believe that it's collected the energy and so on, and it makes a significant difference. There's a dairy farmer up in just not too far away from here, David Yates, and I remember we had about 20 or 30 farmers in here at one stage, because we were asked to talk about it. David came down with a bucket with sod from his farm, and he pulled it out, and the farmers, "Where are you?" And he said, "I'm over there in King Street." And they said, "That's not King Street soil." And he said, "Yes, it is." And he showed pictures about how his farm was lovely and green and in the summer, and then the farm next door was kind of like grey or brown or whatever. And they didn't believe it, which was fine. And so that was David's contribution. But that's what biodynamics does. And we used it here. And we came in first of all. We used to spread a lot of the biodynamic preparations around the farm, moon, and the calendar. We used to do all those things, and we were pretty successful. It does make a significant difference, certainly in composting and seed sowing and general health of the farm. Makes a big difference.
It's amazing. Like, because I went in very, very sceptical when I went to the course, and
can you give me an example of something that you do differently?
Sowing, basically sowing seeds and so on, and transplanting. You sow
so it's just to do working with the moon.
Yeah.
And the same with the cow, the manure thing.
Yeah.
You put that in at a certain time.
At the end of the summer.
yeah, and there's a whole mixing thing about making a vortex and certain water and then doing it the other way.
Yeah.
And I know, because I was so sceptical, and it's just brilliant.
Yeah.
And I'm trying very, very slowly to build my way to that at home, because I would, I'm a complete and I'm a complete skeptic. And it's just, and the 501,
And 501 then is using quartz crystal, which is ground up, and you do the same. You mix the quartz crystal, you put it in a cow horn, and you put the horn with you put a plug of clay that converts into a fertilizer, and that's a silica fertilizer, which is good for alliums, onions, and that kind of thing. It protects them from from fungus and so on. There is there's a lot of work being done on the scientific side of experiments done, and it does have it has in fact, nobody can really explain it. And they can explain the quartz crystal because there's a lot of silica in quartz, and silica does have the property of protecting things against sun and so on. But look, I don't want to talk.
sorry, that's my fault, but I belong to biodynamics.
So today, so Merve will come in and she will talk about producing food. I'll see if I can make that bigger for you.
Producing food. I forgot to bring my glasses, so.
Yes, I'm sort of going, and I've got my glasses. I know I need new ones, and I'm
I'll
like,
just be wearing these.
too expensive. Oh, thank you.
So that,
Putting these sunglasses on for the prescription.
Yeah.
And what was
If I
making
can,
a decision.
Oh, that's what, yeah, there's two of us.
so there's a bit bigger. So the Judy is the, you know, I don't, you haven't met Judy yet. She'll be along today sometime. Judy is she owns the biodynamic farm, or sorry, the permaculture farm up the road, which was set up in the 1980s. And so she will then take us around her farm, and we will actually see the farm 40 years later, and then we can ask questions about what works. We don't do that straight away. We do that after about 6 sessions, because by then you've got an understanding of permaculture sufficient to ask the right questions. So that's where Judy comes in. She also gives some of the sessions. So on the producing food session, Judy talks about herbivores, cows and sheep and that, pigs and that type of thing, because she has them all on her farm. She'll talk about those. So she pops in at various times through. I've had emails from a couple of people, and they've said rather than have 2 sessions in a month, they would like it back to back Saturday and Sunday. So that's really the choice that we have at the moment. Because if we do Saturdays and Sundays, we're on climate today. Next time we'll do soil, then we'll do the tree crops. That's combined with the other PDC that's running, so it'll be about probably around 12, 13 people, which is a nice way. It'll be really good. Ben is a really good guy, and I hope we have Lawrence along as well, who'll be able to do pruning. So we'll be able to split into one group and go into the food forest and set up a guild. Lawrence can do the pruning, and then after lunch we can swap over. So I'm not really in the picture that week, apart from just flying a drone around taking pictures. So that's the tree crops. Then there's a choice. We can either do the 28th, which is pattern understanding, or we could do the 8th, which would be the day after, which would be pattern. Do you want a weekend, or do you want one Saturday, a break, another Saturday?
For me, because I'm travelling so far, my preference would be just to do it in a weekend instead of coming up and back twice.
Well, you're the third person who wants that. Okay.
If there's a place to camp or anything.
The downside is one of the nice things about having a break is you can actually reflect in the break over what you've learned. But
you mean having a week break?
Yeah, you have got time for reflection. Frankly, I'm not sure an awful lot of reflection happens.
So there's a lot of reflection.
And when you get my email saying this is your homework, might be another time you get some reflection. But
no, it is like I feel like the longer, as soon as you've just done it, that's when you're reflecting a lot.
Yes.
But then the longer time passes, you get like other things.
So it would actually, personally, it would suit me hospital. And to actually give the session on the 28th would be a bit of a challenge for me. I prefer to have a bit longer without an obligation.
Yeah, and that'll be fine because I start a brand new job the next day, so that'll be awesome.
All right. So
but I'm happy with that.
So I'll change it now. If they may text me. So we'll change that to 8. Make that the 8th. What's that coming up there?
And is that springtime? October?
Yes.
October, yeah.
It might be warmish.
Are we just before or just after Labour weekend? Just before.
It'll be just before, I think.
Yeah. Lots of Kiwis.
Okay, I know what's happening here.
Plant lots of stuff on.
Trees.
Usually.
That becomes 8th of October.
Did you get much frost up here?
I've had some ripper frosts in the last. We've had the heaviest frost we've ever had.
Yeah, we've had some frost here. Bird from one of our
we had a frost which froze the hoses. We couldn't open the car doors. It was like, it was the biggest frost we've ever had.
So then the next one that comes up is that would then leave a month before the 11th of November, give or take a month. And then we've got a choice of bringing the 25th forward to the 12th. The site analysis, the producing food, the site analysis is actually a physical session. There's a lot of We do work with the level. We go outside and so on. So that's and Judy comes in, and that's when we explore what questions we want to ask when we go and visit her. So the visit to Judy then is on the. So that's the visit to Judy. So the the site analysis design. The site visit is way further. I'm knocking myself around. So producing food is one with the Murray, which we focus on food, which is both plant food and animal food. No, not food for animals, but food from animals. We talk about stock management. We talk about how to know when the area that a cow needs and a cow that a calf needs, and so on. We talk about all that. We talk about planting by the moon. We talk about how to take care of seedlings and all that type of stuff. Yeah, that's the producing food one. And we also talk about designing your garden. So making sure that you design a garden. For example, you put the high plants behind the low plants, and so on and so on. All very common, makes perfect sense when you hear stuff, but it's something that people typically struggle with, is how to actually get food out of the system. So that would allow us then, if we did the 11th and the 12th, then the site analysis one, there's quite a bit of going outside on that and doing some measuring and that type of thing. That's when you learn to analyse what it is you have and so on. So do you want to do that 2 weeks later, that 11, 12?
My preference is always going to be 2 weeks, but it's up to you now.
You mean
no, and the weekend, yeah.
You okay with that? Okay, let's go with that.
The only thing not really good estimates.
So then then a month later there's the design, and then a month. The 12th is not your presentation. The 12th is the presentations of the other group. That's when they're at the stage of giving their presentations. You may like to come along, and I don't know whether you want to drive all that distance, but it's up to you. I would recommend that if you can, you come along.
So that's a non-compulsory.
Yeah, so that's the 12th.
Is that something that might be available online?
I'll certainly put them online. No.
So that's the 16th of December, is that right?
That's January.
January.
Yeah.
12th of January. Yeah, that's okay. No, school holidays is better.
So what I thought was we can either leave the site visit to Judy. We can either leave that until the 26th of January, or we could bring it back to the 13th, which would be the Sunday, which would perhaps encourage people who've got to drive the distance to come to the presentations on the Saturday, and then do the site visit on the Sunday. That was the thought I had.
Again, I don't want to be pushy, but yeah, that suits me. Whatever suits people.
You're here. That's the difference.
Yeah,
so.
but I don't want to be kind of bossing people around.
No, you're not. I'm the one that gets the shit for doing it.
Yeah, but I would come anyway.
And for me, it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, it's in some respects, working the weekend matters to me, but on the other hand, I know we get a lot out of it. The same appears in February, which is the design for living is sorry, where is it? Yeah, the design for what's that? Yeah. That's the design. I'm getting a bit lost here.
Next steps is on the 10th of February.
It's not in the PDC as such, but yeah, I mean I've set up about 5 businesses. Some of them have been successful, some of them have been less successful. I know what you need to do to set up a business in terms of registering for GST, whether you have and so on. So we go through a lot. We go about marketing, we talk about websites, we talk about domain names, we talk about how to tie it all together to get a coherent something to go to the market with, and so on and so on. So it's basically just a session which is plug. I put it in because What I want to do is for everyone who attends the PDC here, to be able to walk out with confidence. You'll know what to do, but the thing that's often missing in the PDC is the business side of things. And I want to make sure that if you leave the PDC here, that you're confident enough to set up a business to actually do permaculture. That's the idea behind it.
Awesome.
So, and that's what that session is all about. It's all about the business side of things. It was I gave it a couple of months ago. It was actually quite well received. There's a lot of things that people actually haven't, they haven't really thought about. And one guy was, I can give you an example. Set a business plan. A lot of people, they've got a great idea and they try it out, and the relationship breaks down, and all the other type of things that happen. Whereas with a business plan, you can actually set it out so that you're going in with your eyes open.
And that's one of the mistakes we made with our business.
Plan, marketing plan, a communications plan. I talk about all the things you need to do to keep yourself sane while you're setting up and running a business for the first couple of years. In hell breaks you, in year 3, hell breaks loose, and you can't read too much about that. But at least at that stage, you have enough money to have to hire a consultant to help. That's the where did I find it?
10th of February, that was where? Yeah. There.
Yeah, there, next steps. So that's also going to be combined with the other group. The same thing, the 11th of February, we could do our Design for Living, which Design for Living, we talk about alternative technology, we talk about the various methods of straw bale houses and mud brick houses and the various construction methods, and how you can and can't do them in New Zealand, and how you get around some of the rules and regulations in this country. It's not impossible. You just have to do things in the right way. And certainly with the local council, you have to do them. You have to do them a different way. So that's what Design for Living. And again, a weekend. Okay, I hear your thoughts. So that'll be that weekend. And then the 23rd of March, which will be, we can move that as well if you want. You can bring that earlier if you wanted, or later. The 23rd of March is the presentations.
Just let me just check a date for. You'll love me for this, I promise.
I don't think it's Easter.
No, it's not the Easter thing. I think it is. Yep, 23rd of March is great. The weekend before is One Egg, which is a very big festival. Yeah, probably the biggest festival in.
I will publish these next week.
Yeah.
I'll send out my email saying this is what we've decided, and
it's fantastic.
then we'll work from that. I think that's actually quite good. And then we'll still have this place in March. So we'll still, I mean, even if we don't actually have the farm in March, say the buyer wants to get in earlier, then we can, when it's just with the presentations, we actually don't have to have the farm for the presentation. It's obviously nice if we could do the presentations up the road at Judy's, or we could do them somewhere else.
Oh, bananas.
Good. Well, thank you for your input there.
My input.
No, as I say, I felt the email I sent out was perfectly clear, but
I always have to get someone to check my emails because I'm a bit blunt.
Normally what I do is I write them one day and I send them the next day, and I did that, and I thought it was perfectly clear. Jennifer read it, and she said it was perfectly clear. But it seems that what I wrote, the tone of the email was that this is what it's going to be, because boom, boom.
Oh no, I never saw it like that at all.
If you want to heat that up, just pour it into the kettle and press the button.
Awesome.
Okay, well, so we'll go with this then from now. I'm really excited about the fact that we're combining with the other PDC, because they're 6 months ahead. And I think that's a lovely learning experience for both groups there. I think they'll. So today we were going to talk about climate, weather, and so it's quite appropriate, because one of the major changes we've seen with climate change is actually in the weather, and I think it's becoming clear to everybody that there is something big happening. It's becoming, it's becoming obvious to every country that there's some significant changes. Even in America is having, the fires, it's having the floods, Europe the same. That it was magnificent is the easy word for it. It was on the River Boyne, which is a beautiful river, meandered through the property. It was just idyllic. But then I went on the Irish Meteorological website and I checked out the predicted floodplain, and no problems for the 1 in 1,000. No problems for the 1 in 10. No problems for the 1 in 100. And then I looked at 1 in 1,000. And well, that's
1 in 1,000 years.
No,
No.
I'm going to correct that in a minute.
Okay, sorry.
That's not what it is. But 1 in 1,000 showed that the house was underwater, and the whole. I noticed the climate changing. Yeah, when we arrived here, we used to have 4 or 5 frosts every winter. Since about 3 years, we haven't had a single. We had one this year for the first time, but it was only it didn't actually touch the ground. It was a frost at that height, and the reason you know it's at that height is you can actually see the plants burnt.
Yeah.
You know, the stem of the plants. Anymore. Kikuyu is rampant because Kikuyu can't take sub-zero temperatures, and it used to be not a problem because sub-zero would come and Kikuyu would die, and so Kikuyu was kept in control. Kikuyu at the moment is rampant everywhere.
Is that the grass thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the one with the it's the long skinny one with all the stories on it. You see it growing it'll grow through the cracks in the concrete.
Yeah.
That's Kikuyu. It's just because there's no frost anymore to kill it off, and it's just taking out. It might take maybe 20, maybe 100 years before it gets too hot for you, because it doesn't grow down south, but it doesn't grow up north rather because it's too hot. So, and also we see bananas flourishing in this climate. I'm working with a guy from the Botanical Gardens to explore the feasibility of bananas in autumn. If we could produce better and tastier, albeit slightly smaller bananas here, then the market is there because everybody loves bananas, and we wouldn't actually have all the food miles taken to bring them across the ocean or halfway around the world to us here. So there's a number of studies like that which are starting to come up. So the climate is changing, and I think the weather events. Climate changes very, very slowly, but it is definitely changing. And the weather events are really making it clear that there's something big happening. There's talk about the Gulf Stream. In the oceans, you have these major currents which have been flowing for ever since the last ice age, basically, and they're responsible a lot for the climate around the world. And these major currents are now under threat. The one that comes up from the Antarctic is under threat, which could really start. Well, nobody really can monitor coming down from Alaska down the east coast down the west coast of America, which around San Francisco meets the hot current coming up from Mexico. And that's why if you ever go to San Francisco, they say you wear a t-shirt and a thick jumper, because when the Labrador current is around, it's cold, warm, hot. If that disappears, why have you got you've heard of the sea lions in San Francisco? They're there because when the hot current meets the cold current, the cold goes underneath the hot and brings up a whole load of fish for the sea lions. That's why they're there, because it's about some feeding ground for them. If the currents change, they'll go somewhere else. So there's a massive number of things happening that. So let me just bring up the session. We'll kick off now. I'll go.
You do cover like water saving reflection or stuff like that, do you?
We can talk about that. We do that in Design for a Living, but we can talk about it now if you want.
I think that's one of the things I'm the most concerned about. Like, it's just running out of
water sovereignty is a major. That's something which is coming around the corner big time.
And like, how can you harvest? Because a lot of the places I'm looking at in Europe, it's like
something about it. They've seen the future in water. Come on. So the bottom line is that climate is something, and they determine then things like the temperature and so on, and then they say, well, that's the climate. So climate doesn't really change significantly over time. However, there's a general change. And it means you can get 4 seasons in one day in Auckland. And there's a lovely, Tim Finn, one of the New Zealand songwriters, wrote a song about it, 4 seasons in one day. And it's not. So that's the main thing about weather. Oops, going a bit fast. Weather first, and then we'll talk about climate. So if you look at a weather map like that, you can see, and this is when Hurricane Gabriel, when the Cyclone Gabriel was coming down. That's the blob on the left. You can see there's lines, and do you know what those mean? I wanted to.
Do we?
Do you know what they mean? Has it ever been explained to you?
No, this is all.
Okay. Well, the blue triangles are what they call a cold front. And I'll show you in a second what that is. The red circles are what they call a warm front. And they're basically to do where you've got two loads of air meeting. When you've got cold air pushes in under hot air. And hot air slides up over cold air. The warm front and the cold front. And then you get so that's at surface level. And then you have the occluded front, which is you can see it up in the right up here. You can see there's the line shows red and blue, red and blue, red and blue. That's called an occluded front, and that's happening on the surface of the Earth. It's happening up in the air. So there's a band of hot air going up cold air, but it's actually it's happening up in the 30, 40 meters up in the air. And they all create clouds. I mean, you look outside today and you can say, oh, well, this is probably a warm front. And I'll show you why. Now, why is it called high and low? Because when people started measuring air pressure, they used a tube of mercury, which was in a dish, and the air pressure, it was a vacuum at the top of that tube, so they fill up the tube, turn it upside down, put it into a dish of mercury, and then obviously the weight of the mercury would then pull down and create a vacuum, and as the vacuum sucked the mercury back up, it would give it a level. And then as the pressure hit so what I'm talking about, you'd have a tube of mercury, you'd fill it up, you'd have mercury in your dish, and then you'd invert that, and obviously the mercury would sink down and create a vacuum at the top. Then when the air pressure pressed high pressure, it would press down, that would go up, and if it was low pressure, then that would sink back down again. And that's where you see the numbers. You see that you've got 1,000, you've got 984, you've got 987, you've got 9, so on. That literally was the height of that column of mercury. Disk, which has got a vacuum in it. But that's the principle. That's why you have the 1000s and 98, 980s and so on. It's physically the height of mercury in that column. And they used to, so that's how so high pressure, if you like, a lot of air pressing down, and it shoves that up, so that it gets higher, and when there's less air, it sinks back down, which is lower. Now, why do we get high pressure and low pressure? Well, if we take, where's my cloth? If we take the Earth, and we take the Sun, we can consider the Sun's the air there, because it's hotter, hot air is going to rise up. And the bit where but it can't go, I mean, it just doesn't disappear off the Earth. It actually comes down again. So it comes down again like that. And funnily enough, there's another one like that. So this air here is moving like that. It's going up and it's coming down. As the Earth spins, it drags the air with it, so you don't get a vertical air coming in, you get a horizontal air coming. So you get so it's spinning south. You get up here you get the southwesterly winds, and down here we get the northeasterly winds. And and that's why, and this bit here is usually around 40 degrees, which is why they're called the roaring 40s in ship terms, because that's where you get that temperature moves as it goes around the sun. Its axis is not, it's not parallel to the sun, it's actually at an angle to the sun. So this is, we're down here, so this would be our summer. We're pointing towards the sun. Then we move up into here, which is between the roaring 40s. And then in winter, when we've gone the other side of the sun, the axis is that way, we're actually in the middle of this windy stuff. So that's why our winters are quite, there's a lot more wind in winter than there is in summer. So, and that's also why these pressure areas, this high pressure area, as the Earth moves underneath it, when it's up in the tropics, it brings down it gets moist air, which then creates the cyclones and so on. Our weather is also complicated by the fact that we've got Australia close to it, and the desert heats up, both in the winter. So over Australia, there'll normally be a high pressure area in the middle of Australia. Now in the summer, because the Earth has slipped underneath us, that tends to come across and blanket New Zealand, which is really great because the high pressure area protects us from the cyclones coming down from Fiji and Vanuatu and the Coral Sea pressure area, and they scoot up around it into the ocean, so we're protected from that. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen, as with Gabriel. That high pressure area can take a bit of a hammering, or can weaken for some reason, and then the cyclones come down and they smash into us. So it tells us where the cold fronts are, in other words, where the hot air is meeting the cold air and going up over it. It tells us where the warm fronts are, where in other words, where the warm air is meeting the cold air and going up over it. Sorry, where the cold air is meeting the warm air and going in underneath it. And it tells us the high pressure areas. In the southern hemisphere, the wind goes clockwise here. In the northern hemisphere, it goes anti-clockwise around the high pressure area, and the other way around with the low pressure areas. In the low pressure area, in the southern hemisphere, the low pressure area, the wind goes around anti-clockwise, and in the northern hemisphere, it goes around clockwise.
Right. So your mix is the opposite. You say anti-clockwise for high and clockwise for low.
Well, that's right.
Or New Zealand, or
Anti-clockwise. Oh, sorry, I just got the spin the wrong way around. Yes, it's
high is anti.
Yeah, high is anti-clockwise.
Okay.
I beg your pardon.
No, that's okay. I'm just.
No, you're right. Thank you for pointing it out. It's the wrong way around.
Okay.
So it's clockwise around the low.
Yeah.
And it's anti-clockwise around the high.
Okay.
And that's caused by this effect here of the warm air leaving where the sun is strongest and coming down further up, and then the Earth spinning underneath it around.
I wish my geography degree teachers had explained that bit something. Would have been easy.
Here's the cold air, and so cold front is where cold air is pushing in underneath hot air. So we've got a band of warm air, and the cold air is pushing in. It gets quite a steep gradient, which means that you get a lot of rain because the hot air is rising, if you like, it's not quicker, but it's rising along a steeper gradient. So you get thunderstorms in the patch, but it's quite strong. And then you've got the other one, which is the warm front, when warm air slides up over cold air, and that's a much more gradual cold air, and the warm air is going up over it, so you tend to get longer, lighter rain. And then you have the occluded, you've got cold air, cool air, and warm air, and the cold air is coming in. The warm air is higher up to the what are called troughs. The isobars these are all of equal pressure. I think I might have said that. So that's like a contour line on land. The ships are, if you like, movable weather stations. They're giving this information constantly back to the shore stations. So whereas when I used to sail in 40, 50 years ago, we used to listen to the weather forecast. It was given, probably around 4 times a day, and it was religious. At 12 o'clock, there was what was called a silent period, which was where people could give their maydays and if they were in trouble, and then at 4 minutes past, the weather forecast, and they would give for all the points, all the lighthouses around the UK, and the same in France and Spain and so on, but when we were in the UK, all the lighthouses around the UK, they would give the air pressure, they would give the wind strength, they give the wind direction, and they would give the visibility, which basically we write all these down, and then we plot them. So we used to make these maps ourselves, and then we'd interpret, because it would say if the pressure was falling. Well, if it was falling, it meant that there was a low pressure area coming in. If it was rising, then it was a high pressure area in, and if it was rising, then and so on. There was a whole lot of codes, and I remember sitting down below, being chucked around, scribbling these down like crazy, and then we'd spend maybe the next half an hour. It used to be me that did it because I actually had a fair grasp of it. The other guy was a much better sailor, so he used to do the sailing, and I used to do the weather. And then that would give us and you do this on hours, so 4 times a day. You do this, and that slowly, after about a couple of days, you'd actually build up a picture as to what's happening in the atmosphere. So that and I used to start, because I was using the navigator, I used to start 2 or 3 days before we'd leave, and I'd start making the maps, and then start to see the patterns that were developing and what was likely to happen, predictions about where we want to go, what sails we want to have ready, and so on and so on. But these days, all these maps are done by there's so many ships around, and there's land stations, and there's even amateur weather stations, and they're all being collated, and the computers crunch these out and produce these pictures. And
is there a website that you recommend for it?
I like weatherwatch.co.nz. A guy called Philip Duncan. He does a lot of explaining as to what's happening with the weather, rather than just saying it's going to rain tomorrow. He actually explained why it's going to rain tomorrow. I find Philip Duncan's weather forecast really, really good, because what you get is in New Zealand, because we're such a skinny country, the weather can be, it's very hard to predict the weather for New Zealand, because we've got tall mountains and we've got a very narrow country. For example, the weather in Auckland is not purely, or in the Manukau Harbour, because I used to run a lot of races. When the tide, we'd have to work out whether the tide was out in the Manukau, because when the tide is out, it exposes the mud. And if it was a sunny day, which then could completely annihilate the winds on the Hauraki on the other side, because there's only, the isthmus of Auckland is about 45 kilometres wide, so it has a huge effect on that. So we could look out and we hear that the forecast for the Hauraki Gulf is 20 knots of wind, and we'd be sitting there a bit close to shore in total total calm, because the Manukau, the tide would, and then the tide would change just 6 hours later when the tide's back in, the Manukau would cool right down, and then we get this massive wind coming in, because it would be double in Auckland a number of years ago. They were forever moving it around the place, because that was purely because they knew what the tides were doing. There's about a 4-hour difference between the tides in the Manukau and the Hauraki Gulf, and they have so much effect on the local weather. So Philip Duncan explains all that. He explained why in Nelson it's really sunny, because the hills around are basically break. Sorry? Okay.
Weird, eh? Not the heat and the sun that Nelson has, so.
Okay. Yeah.
But
Well,
that's, again, there's your climate change.
Yeah, it's got a specific microclimate there, which is sheltered from the wind, so you don't get a lot of wind coming over Nelson. So those isobars are like contours in the air.
Yeah.
They're areas of equal pressure. And in general, when the isobars are close together, the winds are strongest, because you've got a large pressure gradient. And when the isobars are far apart, then it can be warm and the occluded. cold front, so this is where you get your big, tall clouds. You'll see a shape of an anvil, and then you can be sure there's thunderstorms coming and that type of thing. They're usually quite black because they're very dense. So yeah, Monday the 13th was the cyclone Gabriel coming in, and you can see there's quite a high pressure gradient there, which meant that the strong winds. And these were if you remember, there was 2 dumps of rain, and this was the 2 cold front. These were the 2 warm fronts here that gave the trouble. And so that was cyclone Gabriel. You know, if you were to do the contours, it would go up and down, so people don't bother, just go across. But it does mean that there's a big valley. So these are called troughs, and that's that's traditionally is where you don't want to be if you're sailing. If it's a deep trough, deep shit, it's it's the area where you're going to get the strong winds. So that was cyclone Gabriel coming in. You can see here, this is the Australian high I was mentioning. It sunk a bit lower. And so we had the high here. We hadn't got the high extending over New Zealand, but that high then, with this very deep low, squeezed the air, which meant that we got the strong winds which brought the trees down, and then of course there was the rain. The trees washed down the valleys and blocked the rivers and broke the bridges and all that type of thing. The other thing is but it's also been accelerated by the whole system moving. So so it got the strong wind whizzing around the cyclone, and you got that wind was then added to by the fact the cyclone. There's an awful lot more you can talk about it, and I'm not going to go. 20 years of sailing experience and doing all this. If you're in a sailboat, you don't want to be here. You want to be here. So not the racers. The racers will actually want to be in here because that's where the strongest wind is, so they can go like hell. But the normal recreation sailors or whatever else with the family on board, they will do it their utmost to stay in this part of the cyclone, which is the safer. It's not the safe side; it's the safer side.
Yeah, we had to close for a day at work. That's normal, because of the trees.
Will be taken back. Well, that's the type of thing you're talking about.
So we get pretty strong winds pretty regularly.
New Zealand, we get quite a lot.
So is that just because we have a big mountain right beside us? Would that be giving?
Your mountain won't be in Taranaki. Your mountain won't be affecting.
Yeah.
It will be affecting the rainfalls because the wind will go up, and we'll find that.
So I'm only 150 metres from. I actually live on a mountain.
Yeah.
So we get we get horrendous wind, like 120.
Well, they will be exacerbated. They will probably depend. Well, it's a bit hard to say. Mountains affect pointed mountains.
Yeah.
Because you get the wind being sucked around the mountain. It's a bit like an airplane. If you've got an airplane wing, going through the air, the wind out the air on one side is stronger than the air on the other side. I mean, people used to say because the airplane wing is shaped that way, then this wind is going to go further to get to here, so it's going to travel faster. You get the same thing with any mountain like Taranaki, which is basically a cone. When the wind hits that, it will go faster, won't forecast. They'll be good for a number of days, and then their accuracy will die down, and they make no suggestions because it's so unpredictable. It's one of the things that we haven't learned to control. It is based on an average over a long period of years. And where you are on the Earth's surface and what type of landscape you have really determines the climate. For example, here we are in Waiuku, we've got very, and it'll be black, and we'll be here in a t-shirt. We had a guy come out to do some irrigation work, with hardly any wind, and that's a difference of, I don't know, even 80 kilometers. So it's very important when you So the different climates are, there's temperate climate, which is the beech forests south of New Zealand, which is a wet winter, a dry summer, and the organic matter is in the soil. So 60%, so it's typically grassland. These are the terms that they use to describe. So it's summer, the winter, and they form a mass on the ground below, and so on. Regrowth is very slow, or slow. You don't need to cultivate a lot because a lot of the goodness is already there. The soil is typically acidic, and that comes as water falls down through our atmosphere. It reacts with the carbon dioxide, which is naturally in the atmosphere, and creates acidic. It's called carbolic acid. So even if you don't do anything, your soil will become more and more and more acidic. It's being exaggerated now because of the amount of carbon dioxide in the air, and so oceans are becoming more and more acidic. It's a natural process. It just happens. Limestone rocks are getting eaten away because the limestone, again, purely to neutralize the natural effect of the acid rain. Now, acid rain that's a term which was coined in the 60s, which was specifically over Germany, where you had a lot of the steel and the coal producing was in southern Germany, and you could clearly see that the rain had done damage to the paintwork. So that's where the term acid rain comes. It's got nothing to do with what happens naturally in New Zealand with the carbon dioxide in the air and the water falling through the carbon dioxide. It's a different form. Sulfuric acid is way more corrosive and way more dangerous than carbolic acid, which is the other one. But it does have, in our case, it does make our soils acidic. And now with climate change and the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the ocean, so on and so on. It's a lot of people say that increased carbon dioxide is actually quite good for the environment, because plants breathing, they convert carbon dioxide into oxygen. So as long as we've got sick, and the crops are what's called a bacterial system. That's the then you've got the next one up is the is tropical, which is in New Zealand terms, we're subtropical here in Waiuku. We used to be high and temperate, but I think you'll have to accept that we've moved into the subtropical, which is we're not fully tropical yet, because we don't have winters. Wet country, we've got bloody wet winters. In New Zealand, right up to the only tropical area at the moment is up around neighbouring Anglican up there. That's tropical. It happens up there. It's very dense, so you've got the biomass which is up there, up in the air, usually 20, 30, 40 meters high. There's very little grass below. There's very little life below. A lot else down below.